Robert Kanigher in DC. They were all guys who worked with Kanigher. To what extent do you think Marvel was the beneficiary of the fact that some people really didn't like some of the DC editors at that time?
That's fine, since a lot of them didn't like Stan either, you know.
Well,
people don't like editors a lot as a general thing. You had Mort Weisinger over there, you know, I mean, my dream at one time would have been to see Mort Weisinger and Robert Kanigher, you know, mud wrestling.
I think Weisinger had a little weight advantage.
Yeah, he had an advantage. He was a sumo, and Kanigher was more of a sprinter.
Okay, but there were people who came to work for Marvel at that time because they liked the atmosphere. Some of them liked Stan. Stan was so genial and such. I want to talk about the atmosphere there at Marvel at the time, as a differentiator from DC. It seemed like a much more fun place. When the first time I went to the Marvel offices, which was 1970, I was comfortable dressed roughly like this. At DC, the day before, I wasn't comfortable not wearing a jacket. Marvel was much more casual. How much do you think that contributed to the books, the atmosphere of the office? Just the spirit that Stan brought of fun to the material.
I think it would have had to make a difference. I think creative people naturally work better when they're happy. I can't imagine working in a situation where I was working for somebody that I hated and despised, and being able to create for that person, at least not the basically kind of happy, cool, hip type of stuff that we were doing at Marvel at that time. And a lot came to the fact that, as Mark said, the atmosphere was just so loose and so casual, so happy. Saul Brodsky, I think, was mostly responsible for what went on in the office and the way that it was run. Saul had a way of letting everybody be loose and enjoy themselves, and yet being able to get what he needed out of them whenever the thing came in. If things got out of hand, Saul knew how to come in and take care of it. Every now and then, Romita and Cohen and some of these other guys had these, Frank Giacoya was one of them, would get into these talks about old movies, Gunga Din. I've listened to them hours and hours and hours talking about Gunga Din. And then go on from the morning, they'd break for lunch, and we'd take it over, lunch would come over, and they'd start up on it again. Sometime around 2 o'clock, Saul came and say, all right, enough of Gunga Din, let's get to work. But for the most part, everybody was allowed to do what they wanted to do and have a good time, and we enjoyed each other's company, we enjoyed working together. And like I said, somebody got a lot of things got hairy when I saw it and cracked the whip.
Now,
funny you should mention Gunga Din. Because one of the first things I remember is when I was working there in that corrugated desk and so forth, which we moved around a time or two, is they got Frank Giacoya in there because he was inking one of the Million models. Of course, he made it look beautiful, you understand, Goldberg. But he sits there at a desk. Well, within a couple of minutes, since I'm sort of behind him at another desk, he turns around, at which point he's doing pretty little inking. And he says, did you ever see Gunga Din? Well, it turned by the time I hadn't seen Gunga Din in late 65, and I said, no. I said, well, I've seen it 50 times. Of course, this is before, I'm sure he saw it many more times. And he began talking to me about Gunga Din, and so Saul took the side and said, listen, there's one thing you have to do. Anytime Frank tries to get to these conversations about stuff and so forth, since you can talk and you're still doing what you do, but when he does it, he's just looking for an excuse not to work. So, so for the next time, I just kind of managed to, shut it off. But yeah, sometimes things did get a little bit carried away. But Saul was very good at keeping. But it's weird because I was the person who worked for the same companies the same day in July of 65. And in the morning, I was there at DC with suits. Everybody had this little cubicle office, and so forth. Everybody wore suits. And Stan wore a suit too, but somehow there was still a much more relaxed office thing. And within a few months, I began to wear turtlenecks in the office, trying to get away from the tie. And then once Stan discovered blue jeans in the late 60s, all bets were off.
Now, Saul Brodsky, for those of you who know, Saul Brodsky was like, he was a production manager for a while. Stan used to call him his right-hand man. He was kind of an all-purpose administrator, assistant, did a lot of art touch-ups. Saul's the guy who designed a lot of the early title logos. Very essential man in Marvel history.
Fantastic Four.
Yes, he did Fantastic Four logo and such. And he inked a lot of Fantastic Four number 3 and 4, things like that. Anyway, Saul told me the following story. He said, there was an artist, I won't mention his name. Stan decided he didn't want this guy working for the company anymore. He said to Saul, you tell him, you get rid of him, tell him there's no more work, we're not giving him any more work. Artist comes in, says, when's my next assignment? Saul says, I'm sorry, we can't keep any more work. Artist blows up, goes, what's going on? He runs into Stan's office and barges in and he says, Stan, Saul says you're not giving me any more work. And Stan goes, "What? Saul, how could you not give this man work?" And he backed out, and they gave the guy a book to do, right there, because Stan did not back up Saul. Thereafter, this is again quoting Saul, when they had to get rid of somebody, they'd figure out when Stan was going to be on vacation. And Saul would do it when Stan was away, and otherwise Stan would countermand some of his own orders.
They couldn't have fired many people then because he wasn't on vacation.
So therefore, whenever people heard that Stan was going to be going on vacation, they thought, "Oh, who's going to get fired?" Now, when I worked for Stan once out here, or here in Los Angeles, on something, one of the first days he did, he gave me a list of people that he said, "These people are going to be calling you. They're calling me desperate, looking for work. Your job is to get rid of them, and you be the bad guy. I don't want to say no to them. I'll tell them to call you, and you get rid of them." All right. Now, Roy, did you ever have a similar circumstance?
Yes. I only had it once, though. I think he saw that that it wasn't my kind of thing. He wanted me to be the person to tell Denny O'Neill a few months after Denny came there. This would have been like the turn of 66 then, because Denny came up in about November 65, right before you did, or whatever. And he said that, it just isn't working out. Well, Denny was distracted. He had just gotten married. His wife was pregnant. And so forth, and it wasn't, and he just felt Denny sort of walked around the office smoking the pipe a lot. You could do that in those days, out in the hall or whatever. And he said, and somehow or other, Stan had this sneaking feeling he just was not thinking about Marvel Comics every second he was doing this. So he asked me to do it, and I ended up talking to Saul. That's what you did when you had a problem. He went to Saul and said, "Saul," I said, "I can't do this." I said, "I didn't even hire the guy. I just, sent him the writing test because I knew him slightly from Missouri." I said, I just feel really uncomfortable, firing it. I guess I have to. Saul said, "No, I'll take care of it." So he put Denny off Stan. Denny still had some writing to do, but unfortunately, Stan let him go in the middle of a newspaper strike, which was Denny's other profession. So it was a little tough and go, but we sent him up to Charlton, and we sent everybody up to Charlton.
And then I'm sorry.
I said we sent everybody up to Charlton. That's where everybody went to Charlton first. Yeah. I started at Charlton. You started at Charlton. Denny was there in Charlotte. Yeah. Steve Skates ended up there when he was let go. He'd been, Charlton was the Sargasso Sea of the county.
Now, after Saul stopped playing bad guy, there was a man named John Burporton, who was the bad guy for a while on production manager stuff. Would one of you describe John Burporton to people?
Let Gary. He knows about
I can talk about John for hours, so we became very close friends. John, I can tell you as far as firing people, John was the type of guy, if he had to fire somebody, he might sit at home and agonize about it for a week. It just absolutely tear him apart to have to do something like that. John was the nicest guy that ever lived. And having that type of responsibility put on him was tough on him. He liked, I think, having the authority to a degree. He enjoyed being in charge. But there were parts of it he didn't like at all. I later got into retail management and found the same thing was true of me. You have to fire somebody. It's about the worst thing that can happen to you, at least for a person like me or a person like John. On the job, it's just an awful thing, and it just killed him to have to do that. On the other hand, John had this biting Don Rickles sense of humor. He was the world's biggest Don Rickles fan, and he would just absolutely cut you to pieces with his tongue every chance you get and just laugh about it and have the biggest time. And if you're going to get along with John, you had to learn to be able to accept that about him. Learn he's just kidding. This is the way John is, and this is what he likes to do. So I spent a lot of years being the #1 brunt of John Rickles' humor. John was a very talented guy. He had more time. He had to become a very talented inker. He did some really good work on the Semi, I know. I have a piece of work left that he did with John.
Describe him physically. He was big.
Yeah, he was a big man. Stan nicknamed him Jumbo John. He was like 6'6", he weighed about 360 pounds. He went on a diet one time when I was in California. I didn't see him for 4 or 5 months, and I came back and he was down to like 240 pounds. I didn't know where the hell did John go, you know? I didn't know what. But it didn't last, and pretty soon he ate himself back up to it. John would eat like no one I ever saw in my life. He did. The last Thanksgiving that we spent together in New York, which would have been in 1977, I cooked a 20-pound turkey and